phrase political policing and see what happens. Because I guarantee you that you'll be met with derision, ridicule, uncomprehension, or a complete lack of comprehension by the media of the idea that political policing could take place in this state. Now, we don't live in fascist Germany, we don't live in Stalinist Russia, there's no such thing. And then, 2 days ago, on Friday, on the Daily Mail, on a very left-wing paper, front page headline revealed, Garda team spying on water activists. A Garda team led by the Commissioner's husband has been secretly spying on water protesters, the Irish Daily Mail have revealed. Significant Garda resources invested into surveillance, both electronic and physical, of people in our society, chosen on the basis that they participated in the protest movement. Chosen because they're opposed to water charges and actively oppose water charges through going on protests, organising the boycott, and organising against metering. You cannot say that that is not political policing. That's a definitive allegation of political policing that certainly seems to be accurate, that is coming from a very senior source within the Garda. And it ties in and it confirms everything we've said about Jonestown since November, and then since February the arrest took place. Because if you go back to November, you had a protest, a spontaneous protest in the community of up to about 700 people at its height. A community, like working class communities, devastated by precisely the cuts that Joe Merton is most responsible for, the cuts to rent allowance, the cuts to child benefit, the cuts to lower parents allowance. A community that traditionally would have voted quite strongly for the Labour Party, and which is precisely felt betrayed as a result of all the broken promises, including the promise on water charges. And so a spontaneous and angry protest against Joan Burton, within which a sit-down protest took place and a slow march in front of her car took place, which delayed her car leaving the area for 2.5 hours at a maximum. There is nothing in that protest, in terms of a sit-down protest and a slow march, that goes anything beyond protests that have happened in the past, to Charlie Hobby, student protests that I have witnessed that delayed ministers for longer than 2.5 hours, protests that leading Labour Party people would have been involved in NUI Galway in the past, for which never false imprisonment or criminal damage charges or violent disorder charges were ever brought forward. So that's what happened back in November. Then in February, you have, over the course of about 10 days, dawn raids with 6, 8, 10 Gardaí going to people's homes and arresting them, on the basis of them being somehow allegedly flight risks. The need for huge numbers of Gardaí. I think it was 8 at my door, it was 10 at Jay Lester's door, so I think it was 16 at the time. 10 Gardaí came to collect them before 7 o'clock in the morning. Arrested, immediately leaked to the media, huge media presence outside the Garda stations and so on. And then files sent from there to the DPP. And then, so that's all entirely irregular in terms of how people are arrested. That normally in those circumstances, even if they wanted to arrest people, they would be arrested by arrangement as opposed to dawn raids or anything like that. Then you get to, 3 weeks ago, 2.5 weeks ago at this stage, where more than irregular, pretty much unprecedented, that it's advertised on the media, and a number of different media sources had it. And first of all, it comes out with Paul Reynolds, who is a very well-known Garda mouthpiece in reality for the Garda. He operates as an external press spokesperson to some extent for the Garda. Paul Reynolds on RT News, having detailed information of 23 people in charge, my name, Mick Murphy's name, Kieran Mahan's name mentioned as people who were present, and the implication being that were to be charged, and a list of charges that different people were to face. Incredible for them to release the information through the media in that way. Incredible on many, many different levels. One, because it's a breach of the law. It's a breach of, it's an interference with the administration of justice. Two, because just a couple of months ago we were all flight risks, and they needed 10 Gardaí to come and stop us running away. And yes, they're happy to put it on the 9 o'clock news, us to hear it, and then not to arrest us for following 2.5 weeks. And it's when you argue with people and they say, no political policing here, they cannot explain all of the irregularities in this case that go from the very, very start of it to where we currently are, the next step, which is that people will be arrested we think, in the next number of days or weeks, and will be charged with extremely serious criminal offences because of participating in a protest against the Deputy Prime Minister. There's no question that what we're seeing is political policing. And that means that it's policing with a political aim, which is aimed at criminalising our movement, the anti-water charges movement in general. It's partly targeted at the Anti-Austerity Alliance as the militant wing of that broad anti-water charges movement. It's aimed at divide and ruling the anti-water charges movement, about separating out good protesters from bad protesters to try to discourage people from going on protests in the future. It has an explicit political aim. And there's no other way of describing it other than political policing. But political policing is not new. We shouldn't be under the illusion that this is the first time political policing has happened in this state. Because from the very foundation of the state, in the final analysis, the role of the state has been to defend the interests of the rich and the elite in this country. The same as, ultimately, the mainstream media, that's the role that they play. And it's precisely as Friedrich Engels, the collaborator of Karl Marx, said, the state and the capitalist society, ultimately, it's armed bodies of men designed to protect their interests. And when things go tough or go hard for the establishment, they resort to that state to intervene, to repress people, to oppress people, and to try to smack people back into their boxes, particularly now in the context of this biggest social movement in decades that has been extremely scared. And you don't have to go back very, very far to get very good examples of this taking place. You can go back to the bin charges protests. I think it was 23 people, including a whole number of people who are now members of the Anti-Austerity Alliance, who were jailed for 3 or 4 weeks because of militantly protesting against the bin charges, and not accepting that they could just leave bins behind, but it being as part of a community protest. The state police were used against people, the courts were used against people, and people were jailed. The Rossport Five, who had the temerity to stand up against Shell and the giveaway of huge amounts of natural resources to Shell and Statoil, and the building of an unsafe onshore refinery. They weren't involved in any protesting or anything at the stage. They just didn't agree with Shell building a pipeline underneath their land. That's what they were effectively arrested for. And then later on in Rossport, which I personally witnessed, significant guarded violence against peaceful protesters without the benefit of Facebook and YouTube and stuff that we have today. But basically, clearly, and they were called at the time, and it was accurate, they were acting as Shell's cops, defending the interests of this multinational. Or you could think of the Cullen dispute, or other building workers disputes, whenever strikes have got extremely serious and threatened to win in circumstances that are strategically important for the ruling elite, the ruling class in this country, well then the state has come down hard against people again. So it's in the essence of the state that we have, and the society that we live in, that ultimately, whenever people rise up and fight back, that they fight back as well, and they're willing to use all sorts of tactics, including evidently, surveillance, Operation Mizzen, paid for with our own resources against us. So that's how the system, that's how capitalism operates. But what's interesting is not that political policing is taking place. That's not really what's new here. But what's interesting is the fact that they've been forced to resort to it. Because the system can't operate on a day-to-day basis, always repressing everybody. They have to operate on the basis of winning some consent for what they're doing. On the basis of ideology, of convincing people that we live in a really democratic society and that therefore people have a stake in it, etc., etc. Or convincing people, the key ideological prop is the idea that the law is the law. And the law is a neutral thing that is decided democratically, and if the law, something's the law, you just have to obey it. Or the idea that the courts, the police, there's the separation of powers, they're above the conflict between classes, the conflict between the mass of people and the tiny minority at the top, that's separate. And the idea that people have to ideologically buy that, people have to accept that, and then they won't be engaged in struggle because they'll just know that you just obey the law no matter what the law is. So that's like the first line of defense for the system, is that ideology and trying to win consent of people to exploit people and to destroy people's lives with austerity, etc. It's a sign that that consent is gone, and that people have seen through the ideology that says everything is neutral, you can't fight back, you have to obey the law, etc. That now they're forced to resort to their next line of defence, which is a more open, repressive attack on the right of people to protest. And that's always the case. In all of these movements, in all of these different countries, the first line of defence is more ideological, more trying to win people over, and then the next line of defence, when that's breached, is a harder line against people. So it's happening now precisely because that first kind of layer of defence of the system has been breached by people. Because you have this massive social movement against the water charges, you have the stored up anger of 7 years of austerity, which had no outlet for most of those years because of the betrayal of the trade union leaders, the sellout, the disappointment of people then in the Labour Party, nowhere to go, the anger building up and building up and building up, and now exploded in the context of a so-called recovery that's a recovery for them at the expense of us. So this massive movement, but in particular, massive levels of non-payment. 57% of people, at least, not paying a legally constituted charge. Legally, everybody is supposed to pay the water charges. If people bought the idea that the law is a neutral thing and we all have to obey it, well then everyone will be paying the water charges. So in particular, the idea, we have 57% of people not paying the water charges. We're in a very good position to win this battle. We haven't won it yet, and we can see how they're going to respond to try and beat us, but we're in a good position to try to win it. We have to keep the momentum up, increase the levels of non-payment, make it the key issue in the next election, and we can achieve a victory on it. That the government, and the state in particular, and the tops of the Gardaí, the establishment in this country, are looking at this development with absolute fear. Because the idea that a mass movement of civil disobedience, which openly and clearly breaks unjust laws, is going to defeat a key austerity measure. And that opens the floodgates whereby people feel, okay, we have the power to challenge the people who are currently in power. We have the power to decide ourselves about laws that are just and unjust, and the power to collectively, through mass action, through civil disobedience, take action to ignore some of those laws, for example the laws saying that people have to pay the water charges. That's a very, very scary situation for an elite to be in that hasn't, broadly speaking, been challenged in a very serious way over the past whole number of years. And then it's combined with the kind of protests that happened in Jobestown, whereby you have a working class community that is expected to stay in its box, not to be angry, not to be vocal, not to be organised, is angry and expresses its anger clearly against the Deputy Prime Minister, doesn't accept that somehow she should, as Ruth famously said, be greeted with a red carpet, bouquet of flowers, etc. And the kind of protests that have happened right across the country with people being organised in a way that hasn't happened previously, thousands and thousands of people becoming activists. So there's no question that this is coming from a place of fear. It's not coming from a place of strength, it's coming from a place of fear of their position. And it's coming from possibly the tops of the Labour Party, but also from the tops of the Gardaí, who are linked to the establishment in a broad sense and are scared about these developments, about what it says for the authority of the elite and their ability to continue to rule without challenge in this state. It is important to say that the charges that people are facing, and they will face, it's not a false leak, it's a real leak. The directions have gone from the DPP to the Guards, and the Guards will follow it through at some stage. It's just a question of when. But the charges that people are facing are more serious than the kind of examples that we've faced in the past. It's more serious than the bin charges, than Rossport 5, or the kind of industrial disputes we've seen in the past where people have been jailed. They were extremely serious in the attacks on the rights of people to protest. But this is more serious because these are not civil offences. These are not injunctions that are broken consciously by people as an act of protest. These are serious criminal offences which have significant jail terms if people were convicted. That's the reality. If someone was convicted of false imprisonment in the circuit court, which is where this would likely be heard, you're talking about months or potentially years in prison. That's like a real prospect that could happen. We all think that that's ridiculous, that there's no way that could ever happen, that it ever should happen. And obviously, if we lived in a just society, we wouldn't be here at the moment, we wouldn't be engaged in the battle that we're engaged in. So that is possible. People should just think about, if that was to happen, that someone was convicted of any of those charges because they were in a sit-down protest or because they were slow marching in front of a car, what an incredible attack on people's democratic rights that is. Even, to be honest, if some people are for water charges, they should be in favour of the right of people to sit down behind or in front of a minister's car, or to walk slowly in front of a minister's car as an exercise of the right to protest, as has been done, tens if not hundreds of times in this state over the past whole number of decades, and is done in other countries. And it's also, in particular, a very, very serious threat to the anti-water charges movement, because it would be used to hammer the movement as a whole, and to the Anti-Austerity Alliance, where, for example, if I was convicted for more than 6 months we would lose the seat and we'd have to fight a by-election. And it's not that, people can say, oh, geez, they're mad, they're not going to do it, Like, a lot of people thought they wouldn't arrest us, obviously. Most people thought that. Then they thought that was crazy when they arrested us. Then people thought they wouldn't bring charges. They're going to bring charges. So, you have to think that they are serious about this. They're not bringing the charges forward so that they get beaten in court. They're serious about constructing a legal argument and trying to convince a jury that someone is guilty of false imprisonment. And they're trying to get people jailed. For whatever reason, they've decided that perhaps in the aftermath of the next election will be a good time to strike against the movement, send some people to jail, send a message to people, enrage a whole bunch of people, that's clear, but send a message to the broader people, the kind of people who only go on big protests like today, send a message to them not to be involved in things in the future. And whether they're right or wrong in that still seems to be their strategy and the line that they're going to pursue about. And so we as a movement generally have to respond. Just absolutely have to respond. It's good that Ken was speaking at the Right to Water from, he's one of the 23 in Jobestown today. It was good that we had the Jobestown 23 banner at the front of the demonstration today, because we have to say to the movement as a whole, you cannot say, as some people have said, this is a distraction from the main thing about the water charges. It's not a distraction, it's an integral part now of the battle against the water charges. Obviously, we maintain the focus on building non-payment and protesting against the water charges, but the movement as a whole has to defend the 23 and defend others who are also facing, very serious Garda action and arrests at water metering protests on a weekly basis or on a daily basis right across the state at the moment. Now that's part of the anti-water charges movement, and the right to protest is a key demand that has to be raised by the anti-water charges movement, as well as the demand to drop the charges for the 23. As a movement, we have to do that. Locally in Jobestown, I think we have to, and I think we are, bringing together the 23, taking people together. People are from different personal, political backgrounds, bringing them together, closed like a fist in unity against the attacks from the state, to make sure that we have a common line of defence, legally, politically, in the media, and to ensure that nobody feels left out, everybody has the best possible legal representation, everything like that. That work is being done in Jobestown at the moment. But we also have to go on the offensive. That attack is the best form of defence against all of these things. What they want you to do is to make you, as Kieran Mallon always says, that kind of cowering in the corner, waiting for the trial to take place, hoping against hope that you get a nice jury and you're not found guilty. Whereas the best way for us to beat these is to go on the offensive, like the protest today, like making the Defend the 23 prominent. It's to build the movement against the water charges in general, but making this a key part of it, and building the boycott. And the reason that the government is reeling at the moment, the reason they're in disarray, the reason they're squabbling with each other about the conservation grant, is because of the movement in general, but in particular because of non-payment. Who would have thought that 57% of people would refuse to pay? After all of the propaganda, all of the scaremongering, all of the lies, 57% is an incredible achievement. And it's a testament, like the 62% in Greece who voted no, it's a testament to the hardening of people by austerity. Whereby people in the past maybe okay, maybe we should pay. It's just, people have had enough after 7 years, and they've decided this is the moment to fight back, and I felt empowered by the movement and have decided to give it a shot. Very, very powerful. But it's also a testament to the thousands and thousands of people across the country who make up the backbone of this movement, who give the real information to counter the lies of the independent newspapers, of RTE, etc., about everything that is happening, and means that we can react quickly to false information, give people the accurate information. We have to try and increase to 57. If we get it up to 60, 62, 63, then the idea that Alan Kenny comes out again, comical Ali-like, and says that, well, it's still a very good start. You know what I mean? After non-payment increases, it just have no credibility whatsoever. And it's also a key reason that they failed the Eurostat test, which is just a disaster for them politically in terms of their whole model of what they want water charges to be. So last couple of points is that I think the trial, which will take place, you hear different things from different lawyers, but we hear the most likely thing is after the next election, in around a year's time from now, is the likely time for a trial. There would likely be common trials of a whole number of people who are charged with the same offence, all the false imprisonment people together, other people, criminal act, you know what I mean, that 2 or 3 very, very significant trials that will go on for 3 weeks, where Joan Burton would be a key witness, probably called by the prosecution, but if not called by the prosecution, she could be called by the defence. And it's going to be really quite an important moment.